Hey everybody, welcome to Synctank. I'm Andreas. Giant's here, Andy's here, Jake's here, David's here, Andy from the Deep Share podcast, and Jake Parsons from 100th Monkey on TikTok, amongst other places. You've seen him around. So welcome. This is your first time, by the way, Jake, to this. We're so spaced apart. What do you guys vote? Is this all right? Are we closer? Is this okay? Yeah, okay. This is not following COVID protocol. You're supposed to be at least 6 pixels away screen for safety purposes, according to the terms of service of YouTube, but we're going to just go with it. I think this is fine. Jake,
feels good.
it's almost done. They told, an important news before we even start. Let's just do a prelude here that this week is the last time that essential workers can get free at-home COVID tests. So just so you know, oh man, they took him away. That's the last. No, he'll be back. I'm sure there's just some moment. This always happens. It's cool. Like, can you imagine in a real talk show if someone was on the couch and they just disappeared and then they just reappeared there because reality started breaking down?
That's happening with the Pope, man. They've been doing like live broadcasts where the Pope comes out and he's like waves at everybody, and then as he's going back in, he like glitches for a second, like disappears and reappears.
We should get the Pope on. That'd be good. But they're going to take away essential workers' COVID tests because they say they don't have enough funding for them to get their COVID test. But to me, this reads as a like, okay, guys, come on with it. Like, the workers need to get back to work, whether or not they care about what is going on with the health. Actually, it's about the economy, and they're just saying, hey, okay, move along.
Recognition of the faultiness of PCR, but
that reminds me, right? So I wanted to pull this up as well in case anyone gets confused about this. These are YouTube's terms of service regarding things like, where was it? I just had it a while ago. Is it here? I lost it. Oh man, it froze because it's so terrified of what I might find. COVID medical misinformation policy. There you go. So just so you know, guys, we're not going to be saying anything that would contradict anything that the World Health Organization, the WHO, or the local health authorities, LHA, have told us are acceptable to say, or that we've gleamed from their conferences on YouTube or something to that effect in the time that we've been in our homes. But of course, this is not to say that these things that there's a, we would never offer medical misinformation about treatment or anything like that. We're simply saying that the treatment that was available is being pulled off the shelves so that you can't even get that, right? So, I mean, where's that leave people?
Well, you're talking about testing.
Right, to see if they've got this thing, right?
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, if we could go into, cycle thresholds and all, but that stuff is available to people. It's like Brave New World, where it's like the information's out there. If people want to dig and get it, it's there. You have to weed through whatever you have to weed through, but it's still there. A lot of people aren't necessarily like motivated, especially if it goes against things that they've previously said, and they don't want to have to, feel the feelings that might come up with having asserted something really strongly in the past and then finding out that it wasn't entirely what you thought it was. And so, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's effectivity is an important thing. I think that's something that's been discussed. I think you can say that there are medical studies that have questioned the effectivity of certain metrics that are being used to discuss what these things are. I don't know. So, but it does seem, though, at the end of the day, they're saying, whatever the answer is, because, we're not these big scientists. I'm no Bill Nye or Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? So I have to leave it to these experts, and they're saying we're supposed to go to work, right? Going to work is okay. We can work. Everything is fine. At the end of the day, is that what they're saying?
There's a great old video of Bill Nye where it's I don't know exactly when it's from, but it's like a number of years before COVID, where he basically has a big mouth on a stage and he starts shoving things into the mouth and listing off the ingredients that were in vaccines at the time. So he's like squalene, and it's because, that in the past, the largest demographic of quote unquote anti-vaxxers was like liberal mothers. And so he was kind of like speaking to them, to that demographic. And it wasn't until, the Trump era that those roles kind of switched, the goalpost changed.
What happened?
And so, yeah, that one's a trip, it's like, so now whatever, you get the idea. But yeah, you try find that video. I've tried to find it since. I can't. I know I've seen it with Bill Nye with his fucking bow tie or whatever, and kind of like, you know, really making a point that that this safety is very questionable here, and that would be unheard of for somebody like him and with his platform to say something like that now. So, yeah.
Oh my God. Also, cashless society, cashless Starbucks. So this is the one that, you know, is similarly related. People protest as some Starbucks outlets go cashless. Starbucks has said they have no plans to go cashless in the UK stores after one of their outlets in Bradford posted a sign declaring the coffee shop was about to go cashless next month. I mean, so this isn't everywhere or anything like that. They're kind of saying, hey, here's some pilot programs where, you know, like in Denmark, they went cashless in a lot of places, and they want to just go cashless everywhere as soon as possible. And they've got all these excuses saying, hey, it'll be a lot safer, cleaner. People won't be touching each other's hands. Have you ever seen that thing, like Japanese money bucket? I don't even know what you'd even call that. I'm careful to put on moderation. But they put the money into the bucket so that they don't touch each other's hands. It's fascinating. And, you know, it makes a little bit of sense. But they want to avoid the whole thing by going cashless. What do you think? Is this just more of the you'll own nothing and be happy?
Yep, the great reset.
Sweden's been going cashless for quite a while now. And in fact, there's people that have, you know, they can have a chip put in their hands. They can open their door, that they can pay in certain places and those kind of things. And it's funny because, like, it's kind of how it goes. You'll have places that are really ahead of the game in certain ways, and then in other ways, it's like if you get caught with weed in Sweden, you know, you might be looking at real prison time. You know, and like there's a lot of places in the world where at this point we've moved past that, and so, you know, it's always kind of this give and take deal. You know, where.
How long is David Icke and Alex Jones and people like that saying that we're headed towards a cashless society, right?
Oh, sure. And got everyone
30
you know,
years now.
freaks out and talks about how absurd a supposition that is for so long. And then once it becomes the thing, then they're like, well, of course it's that way. That's the three stages of truth, right? At first it's ridiculed, and then it's opposed violently oftentimes, and then eventually it's accepted as self-evident. You know, it's like as whenever you see like something where the media is really pushing something, especially if there's a product involved, a medical product, like they'll really, you know, come down on anybody that questions it in the slightest. And then enough time goes by, and then you're like, oh, well, of course that's the way it is, you know. And then it's like, and people will act like they thought that the whole time, even though most likely they didn't, you know.
Or they'll just say something like, well, the information that you had was not what I have now, what the powers that be have finally bestowed upon us.
Right.
Now,
I mean, it's always a tricky one. When people say like common sense, and they're like, it's just common sense, and you'll have people with completely diametrically opposed views, and they'll both be saying it's just common sense, which reminds me of that great Einstein quote where he says something along the lines of like, common sense is just kind of like a storehouse of information you accumulate, or prejudices that you accumulate before you're 18, you know, that you kind of keep with you. And I think that there's truth to that. One's version of common sense can be much different than another person's common sense.
Yeah, it's going to come down to two different societies eventually, because there's going to be people that can work outside of the system, that are outside of the cities, have their own land, farm their own food, have their own wells, have solar set up, generators. They can do, you know, turn biomass into diesel or whatever, and they're gonna function outside of the rest of the cities that are going to be all like prisons, right? It's just setting it up for a big prison.
But yeah, isn't that the question? Like when we have crypto, I mean, so this is just kind of furthering us along to enable us for crypto, because then people are more used to using digital money. Then they can start using off-grid digital money, decentralized digital money. I mean, already these big banks have already figured this out, and are, you know, use UBS and whatever financial have created their own tokens, which are representative of hours of time of labor, right? I think this is you know, in that show Silicon Valley, they make their own crypto coin, but it represents a certain amount of time that their compression scheme will run. And so they're selling that, you know, for whatever the value is at the time on a free open market. So, I mean, you could do that with real water and with solar and with your nature, or with just service labor in the city. It doesn't have to be tied down anymore to the Federal Reserve.
Right. Now, where it ultimately goes from where it is and where it's going, time will tell. So it's like even what we saw with just like our own currency as it exists, like the original intentions that were behind it were like, you know, pretty serious. Like they're, you know, like you can find it in the early symbolism of the dollar from Germany. You know, like the way that we related to that was like, you know, this could be a very poisonous thing, but we're going to set an intention to relate to this in a different way. Now, just like any organization gets co-opted, that's always the concern. It's like, as good as this may be right now, is it a Trojan horse for a kind of digital current, like a cashless society that won't look the way that it currently looks? This is just kind of like getting people along. It's, you know, it's that it's like the sheepdog thing that kind of got me into trouble a couple episodes ago. You know, I don't know if it's trouble, but it's like it's a difficult thing to discuss because there's so many nuances involved. So when you're looking at something that may on a certain level actually be a genuine variable, you know, how that ends up expressing itself and its ultimate, you know, end can be radically different, you know.
Yeah, two sides of a coin and two sides of a dollar, right?
Two sides of my head, yeah.
But I mean, it is interesting to consider the dollar, I mean, and the symbolism, because you have this Babylonian or, you know, cuneiformic sigil that is the dual snake through the single snake through the dual rod, the double staff, right? The two pillars of Joachim and Boaz or whatever, but it's really supposed to be the two staves at least, if it's not the two columns. And the symbol in cuneiform usually represents like realization of dream or actualization of an agenda or a purpose at the least, but tends to be kind of a magical, like the invocation of a sigil or something like that. So the dollar is this idea of like making your dreams come true, one wish at a time, one piece of one note of a time.
Well, literally,
Movement of energy.
The original dollar, I think is it taller or something? The German,
the taller, right?
That original coin had Jesus on the cross on one side and a serpent on the pole on the other. And on the cross, it read NU 21 for Numbers 21, where Moses puts the serpent on the pole. That was the healing serpent. In Freemasonry, we call this the brazen serpent, I guess it's attributed. So like that's a certain level in Freemasonry, they relate to that symbolism. But the idea is that there's these venomous serpents, and here's a healing serpent. So it's that setting of the intention that we're not going to be that thing, even though this may look like it. We're doing something else here. And
are we the bad guys? Yeah.
Right.
Are we the
bad guys? We are. Yeah. You're one of the whitest kids I know. But yeah, no, there's definitely something to be said for the co-opting of any movement or the co-opting of you know, a currency. So I you know, my sense is that good luck getting around that with this one, you know. So I would like to be more optimistic about the whole crypto thing, but and it also has that air of like the pyramid scheme where it's like you get in early, you get in now, you're going to get a benefit that you won't get if you hold off on that, you know. And so that's part of it.
I like that the crypto market, like Das Kapital, like it's so based on Communist Manifesto, or really the Communist Manifesto is enacting. It says, hey, in the future, right? Not in China, but probably in this is Marx. In the United States in 100 years. You know, he's talking about 21, maybe 2070. But he's thinking that eventually, next 30 years, that this will all sort of materialize because automation will take over certain kinds of labor. And then there'll be Soviets. And that's what Das Kapital was saying, that each economy could be its own economy. You have an economy for water, like you were talking about, economy for solar token. These can all be, you could have the tradespeople economy, right? And this can all interact based on not banks, not states, but actually on services, labors, and goods, which is not the craziest idea. I mean, that actually makes
right. It's just a question of like, which Lenin are we going with? Like,
right. That's
is it Imagine, like, or is it like, you know?
I mean, but the irony there is, you know, because then you've got neoconservatives becoming, you know, the Trotskyites became the neoconservatives, the Stalinites became the Democrats, or took over, assimilated the Democrats. But the Trotskyites, I mean, their whole difference of dictatorship is bureaucratic. It's a bureaucracy instead of a hierarchy or a newarchy. Instead of being all about wisdom necessarily, it's that the system itself will solve the system itself. But bureaucracy doesn't do that. You know what I mean? Like, unless I'm missing something.
And unions aren't always. I mean, there's a big gulf of distinction between various unions. So if we're talking about like the police union, we're having it, you know, just different workers, and it over time, especially, like it ends up expressing itself in a radically different way. So. Speaking
of our trade unionists partners having a protest, so Taiwan fires warning shots at Chinese drones. This is about 3 hours ago. I've heard maybe it was a little earlier than that. I think it's about that, 3 to 4 hours ago. Taiwan fired warning shots at Chinese drone that buzzed an offshore islet shortly after President Tsai Ing-wen said she had ordered Taiwan's military to take strong countermeasures against what she termed Chinese provocation. So here doth begin, I think, the interaction, if not, because it's not necessarily an invasion. I guess what are we going to call that? Because they've been invading.
I said fire a warning shot across her nose, not up it.
Right.
I'm always concerned about warning shots. It's like if you have a weapon, and it comes to the point where you're actually going to take the weapon out. This is like a martial arts thing. It's like SEALOT. It's like if you're going to take out the weapon, you use the weapon. Like warning shots are always kind of weird. Like if I was ever in a fight, I'd hate to take out a knife and threaten the person unless if I was fully prepared to, So it's like, what are you doing? Where are you going with this?
Got to be confident if you're going to do that. Right?
Yeah.
That you can
Where was
pull it off? Warn them and pull it off.
Nancy Pelosi? Where was it? She's supposed to have given them like $1.2 billion. What do I got to go? Zero hedge or something? Zero hedge. I think is where they have this. Taiwan. Biden, 1.1 billion arms sale to Taiwan, which is like, God bless them. But what's gonna go down? I mean, it just seems so crazy. Like we're getting to the point where
Tyler Durden guy. I always see these articles from Zero Head from Tyler Durden. Who is he?
I've really been trying not to blow this dude up because, like, remember the whole reason that Alex got in trouble was because he quoted and rebuffed one of these articles. But it's from this Bulgarian dude, Daniel Ivanjevski, and he's in Silicon Valley, and he's chill. I'm pretty sure he's a great guy. And he probably doesn't want to be blown up all the time, which is why, he goes by Tyler Durden. Sorry, but that's wiki. But the thing is, he does have a good background in Austrian economic theory, and he knows what he's talking about. So there's that. I don't know. What do you think about the Iranian seizure of the American sea drone? This just happened. The government of Iran just took an American sea drone off the Persian Gulf, tried to tow it away, only releasing the unmanned vessel, which a U.S. Navy warship and helicopter approached. So the U.S. is intending to retaliate against Iran. This is all happening simultaneously to the third excursion, or whatever war we're calling, going on along the coast of Africa, right? Because now there's East Africa. There's the oil crisis that Iran and the Persian Gulf is getting involved with as well. So, I mean, all these things, it's a synchronicity show. I know it's not numbers, but what do you think? Are we syncing up for World War III or 4 or 5 or whatever the thing is? Or is this going to be like something weirder because it's not like a war? Because we're saying, hey, they're not invading because these are drones, and a drone blew up a drone. So are we just seeing the automated war in front of us, or what's going on?
I think we're seeing 1984. We're almost going to be living in like two different realities. No, we've always been at war with Eurasia. No, we're always been at peace with Eurasia. And through all of these stories like Taiwan and Ukraine, I've always been demonized for saying, like, that's just a slush fund. Ukraine's the new Israel. And there's very little proof.
Ukraine says they're the new Israel.
Zelensky says that
that's the Skynet satellites. They just set up. They are keeping information in. Everybody thinks Elon's a good guy. Well, where's the information out of those things? So Taiwan's going to be more the same thing. To demonize them, they're going on that BRICS system. And we're going to lose all our chips, all our minerals and everything. We'll see.
Yeah.
Man, I feel like if Elon Musk, if I start hanging out with Elon Musk, I got to be a dick to that guy. You know what I mean? Because Diogenes says that in a rich man's house, there's no place to spit but in the master's face. And there's just, even on any level, if you're near somebody who has that much influence on the world, the court jester has not just the right, but the obligation to say what isn't wanted to be said. And, this is the thing that I think is probably even more concerning, is whether or not he means or whatever his intentions are, how being isolated by being surrounded by a certain group of people, he makes it all. This is why he loves Twitter. It's like being like Princess Jasmine and being able to go to Agrabah,
Yep.
Like it's his freedom. They're taking this princess and letting her free. That's how I feel about his whole life, and everybody who's wealthy and everybody who's part of the system. There's like Nancy Pelosi. What if she started out as just this college? What about this Ocasio-Cortez? What if she was just some chill bartender? I
well,
don't know.
none of them were, and like Elon, his grandparents, everything from his grandparents, what his grandmother was doing, to
They weren't working in the mines that they owned.
Life now
they didn't work in those mines they owned.
No.
Yeah, how he lives his life. His baby's mama is with Chelsea Manning now, and he's a sucker. So, in my opinion, he can't be a genius in one arena and then be totally an Illuminati shill in another.
Right. Well, he's a big time operator. He's not a politician,
Yeah.
But like when you look at like somebody like AOC, for a variety of reasons, like her math, for an economist, her math is often off, and that's there's receipts for that. Like you can go through and you can point these things out, but like I don't know what you guys know, but like for me, I'm like, no matter like what I feel about her is ultimately kind of irrelevant, because what I would like to see, like I used to kind of like scoff at like the idea of like grassroots campaigns, but I didn't really understand the significance of like how important that really is, if that exists, if that's even a possibility, because it seems like every time, just to be Captain Obvious over here, we're always given the lesser of two evils that are kind of giving us the same thing from two different sides. It's like, oh, if you don't like it doggy style, we'll fuck you missionary. Like it's like, take your pick, and it's and so it's like somebody like AOC, if it is true that like she came to where she is through a grassroots campaign, like what I feel about her actual politics, for me on a certain level, not ultimately, but on a certain level, it's kind of irrelevant, because it's like I just want to see more of that. If that's really what that is, that might not be what that is at all, and I could just be oblivious to that. But in
Finkel is Einhorn. Einhorn is Finkel. All right, hold on. We have another friend joining us. Curiosus Animus is in the house tonight. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Cheers.
What's up, Scott?
How's it going, bro?
I've been in the weird shit for a really long time, and I'm appreciative of people who are open-minded into some other potentials and possibilities of what's going on, because the current narrative doesn't seem to fit the bill.
Well, I like that, because this is something that completely segues out of what we were talking about, Taiwan and the war and COVID and all that. I mean, it's important, but you know what I mean? Like in a year, But Soviet calendar refers to the Gregorian calendar implemented in 1918, national holidays and 5- and 6-day work weeks used between 1929 and 1940. The Gregorian calendar, under the name Western European calendar, was implemented in Soviet Russia in February 1918 by dropping the Julian dates of the 1st through 13th February 1918. As many as 9 national holidays, paid days of rest, were implemented in the following decades, but 4 were eliminated or merged on September 24th, 1929, leaving only 5 national holidays. Blah, 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 blah. But the point of the national holidays was to destroy all the saints' days, the different equinox festivals, have a 10-day cycle.
What the hell? So I was just looking at this picture that was like kind of controversial or whatever, of like a group of people apparently in Ukraine with a Ukraine flag, and there's a girl that's supposed to be heiling. And you look at her hand, you can see her wrist. She's got balloons tied to it or whatever. But it's
the Italians and the Spanish did that too, right?
They're all dressed for midsummer. So like I'm like I had to look that up. I was like, does Ukraine celebrate like Scandinavia does? And apparently they do. And then they're really big on those holidays. Yeah, or if you want to call them holidays, whatever. A lot
of the Ukrainians associate themselves with the Rus, and the Rus were the Scandinavian Vikings that came from the north, which is also Russian propaganda, right? The Ukrainians will tell you that that's just an excuse for the Russians to say that they have some legacy in Kyiv, which is their Polish city or whatever they're saying, right? Which is the other irony, right? Because then everyone's like, hey, it's Russia. Hey, it's Ukraine. And the Poles are just laughing because they're like, did you guys read Taurus Bulba? Because it's Polish, But what is Polish, right? Because the Polish were moved on maps too. So it was a lot of work. I don't know. I mean, but the point of the calendar change, right? We have this new calendar implemented in 1918. 1918, by the way, the Soviet Union banned marriage for like a year. They eventually allowed people to do. They're like, okay, from now on you can marry, but you got to just. Because you can get divorced or married in one piece of paper. We'll make it as easy as possible.
That's not one of the countries where marriage is punishment for shoplifting at that time?
No, that's further east. I think the Oost films. They did do that though. If you go, that's not just a joke. If you go to what's it called? Like the Red Sea, like when the Russians were in the Red Sea and they were pioneering, they'd be like, you're all liberated, to like 11 wives of some guy or something. And they wouldn't know what to do. They're like, okay, so we serve you, so that happened a lot anyway. But with the Russians, they thought of marriage, especially after the 19th century, when there had been so many, there'd been the Russian Civil War, there'd been plagues, there'd been deaths, there'd been a lot of orphans, etc. Marriage and family, particularly family, seemed like ableism. You know what I mean? Some people get better families than other families, right? So they banned it. They just wanted to ban the whole thing in 1918. And for a brief period of time, marriage was banned.
It has elitist roots, right? So it's like it usually be used either for business or to tie countries together. See Marie Antoinette tying Austria with France, that kind of stuff. But like, and then it was later that this became more like a regular person. Like, we love each other, and so we're going to get married. It was like everyone would always have mistresses for the longest time until relatively recently.
I think there's always like, if you've ever seen like the kidnapping marriages, right? Like in Uzbekistan, everything like that. That's a part of the ritual, like that they have to kidnap them and everything. But they still, before that, usually pick to get married these days, and then they go through the ritual, which just kind of shows you where it comes from. But part of the ritual still is before the marriage. After they kidnap you, you spend a few days being Stockholm syndrome by the immediate family of the new spouse, so that you're like, you feel shamed, like likely they're gonna think you've been already, if you haven't lost your chasteness, and B, you're going to likely start to become more comfortable with the arrangement, right? So I feel like that's a big part of marriage. They've tried to convince everybody forever, and it's always been part of it. Every movie you've ever seen is like, I love marriage, I want to get married. Like, I mean, it's a weird, who wants to get, you know what I mean? Because like, how many astronauts are bachelors, right? People that are blasting themselves to blow themselves up and try to destroy themselves or whatever, they're married men. They're trying to escape something else even more terrible. That's what I think.
You can't be entirely down on marriage, but at the same time, there is something very Faustian about the whole deal.
I know, but at the end of the day, marriage is also it deviates you from caring so much about society because you care about your family nucleus more.
Isn't that the idea? Like, settle down, have a plateau. It's very much like Ryder tarot versus Crowley tarot, because Ryder, it's like you get to the king, the highest of the royal suits, and what is he doing? He's chilling. He's sitting in a chair. Like, change is the basis for stability, not the other way around. Where did this idea come that we like reach? Like, I guess in the Buddhist sense, you're like, we crossed over to the other shore. But certainly, people wanting to settle down, like, no wonder there's so much dysfunction in so many situations, because you don't actually reach a genuine plateau. That doesn't happen. Like, everyone keeps growing, you reach the top of one peak and then you see the next peak off in the distance and you still have to keep going. But like, people will have this kind of notion that maybe we could just reach that peak and then that's it, we're good. They live happily ever after, and so this is a fairy tale,
I mean, yeah, but I mean, no, but so the thing is, so the Soviet Union, realizing that they couldn't get away with that, they move back into allowing marriage, but then they make divorce easier than ever, right? It was already pretty easy in Islam. You just have to say, I divorced thee 3 times. That was kind of already a modern radical movement. But then now all you got to do is just like sign your name on the official document. You walk into any city hall, any town, because if you go into any town, you have to kind of, there's an index of where you are. You're not allowed to leave your town unless you've got a reason anyway, right? So like, if you go in, you have to explain, right?
Isn't it weird that the marriage is such like a public display, and then the divorce is very much like, we like, generally speaking, like, we don't want to talk about it. And
they got rid of, the Russians got rid of the public display though. And that the same way you get a divorce, you sign another form to get married. You know what I mean? It's all it is. So it became very, and then also you could also get anything from marriage through other ways, right? You didn't benefit from marriage, and often the responsibilities and obligations to a marriage you could get out of and be better off. So much of the time it's like, okay, why would I get married? So you have more and more bachelors. There's all of a sudden a disproportionate number of bachelors, which they've shown in China to be this, hey, if we don't worry about this situation with the male population in China that doesn't have marriage, sometime by 2020 or something, there could be a war, right? Like, and that's always been kind of on the forefront of this idea.
You know about
marriage is building a baby machine.
Marriage is building a baby machine.
Burning Man marriages where you get married.
Oh,
you have
it's
like
Burning
a ceremony.
Man also.
And it is Burning Man. That's
half of the people who are supposed to be here are watching. They're watching them set up a man right now.
Yeah. And so, but they'll do a thing where you make an agreement for a year. So you're like, we're married for a year and we'll check in a year and decide, do we want to renew this for another year? And so it's kind of like you get to like try it out. It's like, I think it's kind of a neat idea. You know, I have some friends that have done that. It seems to work pretty well.
See, like Burning Man to me just seems like full cuckoldry up until it becomes you're the victim, straight up. You know what I mean? I mean, because it shows you this like vibrant existentialism from all the right angles, and it's always you're just seeing this instant. It's like when you see all the smiles in Facebook of different people, but you don't see all the day of them pooping and crying and in traffic, and you don't see what life is really like for them. But you're just seeing like the perfect moments for these people in their whole lives, right? Because they're going there to do this when they're blossoming as well, and they're feeling, you know, perfect. So then you're like, oh, I want that. I want that all the time. I'm willing to sacrifice everything that's valuable in the world and sustainable. You know what I mean? Forget about being a grandparent with like tons of grandchildren. That's I can't even visualize that because I haven't seen enough of it except for Lifetime television. I want to feel this now and die. You know, that's what scares me about the Burning Man experience.
Well, Burning Man is everything all at once. And so like it's hard for me to take an ultimate position on Burning Man because there's things that I actually despise about Burning Man in terms of the consumer nature of the whole event. It's like you guys could not survive here indefinitely if you didn't load up on, like, if you didn't spend a ton of money just to, you know, there's nothing there. It's a blank canvas. Whereas like the Rainbow Family, like I can talk shit about the Rainbow Family too, but it's like those people were number 7 on George Bush's terrorist list in like 2002. And like somebody told me that, and I was like, I roll, like, what are you talking about? And then I had another friend who was in Europe, and they were like, oh, they're talking about the Rainbow Family in the paper in Europe, and they're like, yeah, apparently they're on George Bush's terror. So I got it confirmed from another source, and I was like, wow, that apparently that checks out. And it's like, why would that be? Well, they're on land that they could exist on, and definitely it's like the closest thing to the old communes that we still have that were kind of like brought down through various you know, there's not to say that there wasn't issues with communes, but at the same time we have these associations where we just like dismiss, like that doesn't work. And it's like the Manson murders, these different, you know, it's like it's like if you're comparing Altamont to Woodstock or something, it's like there's just worlds apart from what this could be, you know.
That's another evil thing about Burning Man, right? Is the Black Rock City aspect. It's on BLM property, so it's basically this Napoleonic legal system that they use. I don't know how else you really. There's another term, right? Continental or something. But basically with Louisiana and with places that follow this dictatorship style governance. You know, in Louisiana, if somebody's driving a motorcycle, they could wear a helmet or not wearing a helmet. Just depends on whether or not the governor wears a helmet. It's kind of the joke, because it changes based on how he feels, right? Or they feel. And that's what BLM has always been. You've got these casinos that are built up on these oligarchies that are running tribes, right? They're controlling it's not that the tribe is being in charge of this. It's a certain small group of people every time. And similarly with BLM in any other circumstance, it's like, hey, who's controlling the oil or the free gas or the pipeline or exchange or whatever is connected to?
For those who don't know, when he's saying BLM, he's saying Bureau of Land Management.
I keep forgetting.
Yeah, you have to really qualify that, or some people are going to go, what is he saying? Yeah.
Dude, no, Bureau of Land Management matters. I need the t-shirt.
Yeah. Yeah, they're rolling Burns, Oregon, right? Speaking of burn.
Right. Well, right. Okay, so in terms of America, we've got like a number of things that I was thinking about also talking about. One of them is like in terms of the occult connection to some of these guys that are talking about the reset, right? Because a lot of the time they play dumb. And I think that's the thing that no one likes to talk about, or it's like kind of the thing that should be talked about more, is like everybody's kind of pretending, oh yeah, I don't know what we're going to call it. Well, there's a reset button on there. Let's just call it the reset. I don't know.
So hey, I could ask you guys, do you know this? Is that coined by Klaus Schwab, the Great Reset? Because he named his book that. And so like, is that his term? Do you know?
Oh yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's
I find it dubious that he came up with the word reset, though. I feel like
but the Great Reset is a PR campaign for this whole thing, and so
everybody's getting on the same reset now. There were a bunch of resets before. Now this is the Great Reset.
Right. This is the one that they're telling everyone about.
I mean, yeah, like there's a Great Reset initiative that was an economic recovery plan drawn up at the World Economic Forum. So it's in the sense that it's not just an idea. There are literal Great Resets or things called that.
How do you think you would feel after the fact, knowing that you were part of the focus group to judge the name of that? You know what I mean? Where they're always, like, well, what should we gauge this towards? Well, the Great Reset sounds pretty good. Oh, that's nice and nondescript. It's not offensive or anything. It's pleasant.
Meanwhile, you still have half the political class using New World Order like in our faces on purpose constantly. So it's
right. And is that like, so you know this, Andreas, so I know like Alice Bailey threw that term around a lot, and that's pretty old. I mean,
that's kind of what I was going to get at. Is I feel like if we look at the Lucis Trust, they were talking about the resets, and even reset as a translation. Didn't Bailey get the translation from Albert Pike's Veda book? He's a Veda translation. So besides World is Dogma, his other one is like the Veda Compendium. And I forget his source because he's got a guy from like Germany who's somebody, and he also gets the term.
But Albert Pike didn't always list his sources. You know, sometimes.
No, but he did. There's in the beginning introduction in the Albert Pike Veda book, he does go into what book he had, because he had to have a Sanskrit translation in order to go through the Veda and pick it up. But it's Sanskrit's pretty logical of a language, so he could have picked it up that way.
Was it Bill O'Reilly that did all the books that are like killing different people, like killing Lincoln, killing what? You know, and then he did like killing Jesus, and like I was at my ex's house with her mom was reading Bill O'Reilly's book Killing Jesus. She read Killing Lincoln and really liked it, and I went and I looked at the back, or I went to look at what his references were, like who is he citing for his sources, and it said the Bible and other sources. That's literally what it said. I was like, and others, and
Rice and the Bible. Yeah. I don't know. Bill O'Reilly.
You just said Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah. He's got specific medians he divines. Wait, where are we at? Wait, there was a thing though. There was a thought. Bilderberg, no. We're looking on forum. What was it? Reset. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to close that point, which was that reset and was his translation for like some term associated with the Yuga. Like there's a term that as the Yuga transitions, the cusp of the Yuga, and he's
the great conjunctions too.
Yeah. So he referred to it. He referred to them as resets, right? And then he referred to like there's a number of cycles that make up a great reset, which is also what the Mayan calendar kind of jives with. And a lot of people talk with this idea that, hey, you know, the end is near. Neil Gaiman's Sandman, right? They're going to that bar every 100 years and they're saying, hey, the end is nigh, the end is nigh. But there really is supposed to be a point when Aleister Crowley talks about a new age, right?
If you look up the great conjunctions, it fits into it. This is when all those presidents died.
I thought that there was just this really amazing, like, wow, he could keep his, like, David kept his eyes open and he was smiling for like 4 minutes. And I was like, this guy, that is just some Nicolas Cage enthusiasm. But no, he was frozen. He'll be back.
Someone clip that and put it on Instagram as like, see when celebrities glitch out. Like, who is this guy? What?
It's amazing. I liked it. Brian Williamson also sends us indeed. Brian Williamson sends us a super sticker, which I can't see here, but I'm sure it was amazing.
It's
guys,
100%.
You know. Oh, there you go. Legit. If you guys want, you could also send questions through this super chat system. Stickers are also welcome, but we will answer things that you ask. And I'll be looking for David to jump back on. This is a great time for anyone else to jump in, though. Also, Animus, you're new here, and also Jake Parsons. Why don't you guys tell us stuff?
So
fight amongst yourselves.
All right, gladiator style, right? So as far as Dupe is talking about killing this and killing that, there's a book out there called Killing Patton also. General Patton in World War II is one of the Nazis respected the shit out of the dude, and he was revered, and so that's why they took him away from the Normandy invasion and posted him way up north and put him out with the inflatables to be seen. And so they were like, oh well, shit, you know, they're going to be coming up there because you know it's fucking Patton. You know, the guy's facing down airplane strafing fire with 2 revolvers because he's Patton. He's nuts, but apparently he had some inclinations to get into politics when he came back, and people weren't too keen on that, and so he was gotten rid of also.
Yeah, Patton,
pretty interesting stuff.
There's some crazy stuff about Patton actually, in terms of the OSS also after the war and trying to connect an agency. Go ahead, Andy.
Well, and what Patton was had just given to a museum right before the car crash that killed him was the like the Staff of Destiny or whatever.
Oh, really?
The one that had it, yeah. And that was supposedly part of the legend that when you no longer possess it, you fade away. You're done.
What?
And the thing is, he was the only one that was injured in that car accident, and he was in the back seat. And the crash was from the front, I believe.
Dude, when I was with my dad in 2001 in Croatia and in Austria, I think we went to, was it Austria or Prague? I forget where it is, but the staff, where's the Staff of Destiny?
I can't remember. I think it might be Prague though.
We were there, dude, and he was really excited about it. And I had no idea. I was like, this is
Indiana
the staff.
Jones, man.
Yeah, it was like that. He's like, this is the staff that stabbed Jesus Christ.
In the
or
liver.
So they say.
Which relates to the Samael's correspondent to the liver. That's like a very symbolic occult thing there.
Yeah. Supposedly water sprouted out, right? Because his kidneys exploded, right? And so water shot out as well as blood.
The water that came out of dude allegedly had cured the dude. Somebody, the guard who stabbed him when the water ejected from Jesus, they cured dudes like he had glaucoma or some shit like that. I want to say.
Is that a Bill O'Reilly thing or is that in the gospel?
But like, it's out of my back pocket at best. Like don't cite this shit on anyone.
Early Catholic Animorphs though. I remember that edition. No, but that's the thing. Like that, there's the Book of Tobit, right? There's this idea that his cataracts are cleaned by God in some weird way, which is apocryphal, I guess, or at least Catholic. But there are a lot of books that talk about, this healing property of the closer divine. But is that a blood thing? Or are these just like transhumanist deities that have metal blood turned to glass or something?
So I've been getting down on some TED Talks lately, and one of them I came across was talking about exclusion zone water. Have you guys ever heard of exclusion zone water? That shit's really interesting. So
explain to people what it is. Yeah. So
essentially what it is exclusion zone water is water that takes place. So if you have a hydrophilic as opposed to a hydrophobic, a surface that likes to attract water or water is drawn to naturally, as opposed to being repelled by like water or oil, excuse me. What happens is the negative charges are drawn towards that hydrophilic surface and everything else is pushed out away. That includes dissolved solids and all kinds of other stuff. And so I suspect or I have an inkling that the amount of charge inside of a human, especially when your diet's not all full of fuckery, would potentially change your entire body. So, I mean, if you have more pure water that's not as contaminated, your body, like, okay, so let me use an analogy of like formula cars where they're using very high test or nitromethane for the dragsters. It's the highest test water that you have, whereas generally people are drinking public water that's filled with fluoride and all kinds of other shit to keep the pipes clean. So if you're in an advanced Christ-like state, maybe your body has a tendency to expunge a lot of the contaminants.
I like that because then it doesn't even have to be, because then it's just about molecular structure, and harmonic frequency. A lot
Jesus
of that stuff
was a squirter, right?
Say again?
Jesus was a squirter. This is known.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't. That's strictly Gnostic text. I don't know.
Okay.
I think it has to do with the crocodile and Vishnu and all them floating on the water, right? They're all connected. They all walked on water. There's Mercury used to walk on water. All of them where they're a creature that's partially a water creature.
So Jesus said that there was one before me who baptized with water, and there'll be one after me that baptized with fire, something along those lines. This is so weird. Apparently,
is that Bill O'Reilly? Is John the Baptist, and then
so there was like there's a documentary that came out recently on Woodstock '99. And
gosh, I've been meaning to watch it.
This is in my Matrix Office Space thing. I was like tripping out on like that in 1969 it rained, right? And they're like praying no rain and all this, and it was like I related to it. I was like, that's kind of a baptism. And then you have 99 was the whole fire thing. Like the Red Hot Chili Peppers was playing Fire from Jimi Hendrix, and they handed out these candles. Like it's like, here's the toy. What are they doing with the thing? It's like something that almost feels like slapstick about that whole deal. Like it's like, here, we'll give you the thing, and then we'll be like, what are they doing with them? I don't know.
And then Burning Man became popular.
Sure.
Yeah. Right.
Sure, totally. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the slinging of mud at Green Day as well. The political punk band, which isn't punk at all, but it was interesting. I found it symbolic.
Man, that's a good point. Watching the Woodstock doc, I want to do a better job syncing some of the people to Burning Man, because you can see the structure design, but the difference is clear because there's still the excuse at Woodstock that it's actually a real event. You know what I mean? Like you're going to Woodstock in order to see bands play. You're like, oh, I've heard of this band, or people have heard of this band for me. But with Burning Man, it's literally like, hey, at the end of the week, we're going to burn down this statue of a guy.
We're not just going to burn down. We're basically going to burn down the whole city. And if you stay afterwards and start throwing shit, some of the best parties I've been to at Burning Man have been like a week afterwards, when it's just a giant burn pile. Like it just keeps.
But they have started building. They have built a temple, and then they build towers now and things like that. But at first, it was like literally just, if you want to bring your band and play and celebrate for a week before we sacrifice in effigy the statue of a guy, that's fine. But it's not like we're paying Limp Bizkit to be at the event or something like that. That's the difference, I think, between.
You ever noticed that the actual layout of Burning Man is extremely similar to Greek theater, where they do Greek tragedy, where you have the stands that people like. It's, if you look at the two side by side, it's just, it could just
the
be
arena, right?
But it feels meaningful, in a weird way, because you're like, here. It also feels like kind of like it's supposed to be, in theory, like the people's Bohemian Grove, so to speak. So it's like, this is not an elite event. This is a people's event, and there's kind of like this idea of like the one who would challenge the king would be rising up from the populace and not like planted there, who actually has like royal blood, but people don't know that. You know what I mean? Like the old political game that was old even then, like, I don't know, like that it just seems like what Bohemian Grove is like kind of this very pageantry version of the Golden Bough ceremony, but everything's in reverse. I talk about this a lot, but like
cremation of care, right?
Yeah, that specifically the first night of the 3 weeks, that you have that cremation of care ceremony screams of that old ritual, but everything's in reverse, where instead of them killing the king but with the outsider who would then become king and turn the whole kingdom on its head and kind of renew everything in kind of a jubilee fashion, it's like instead you have this kind of like we burn the effigy that would challenge that king, and then we kind of celebrate it.
This is the article I've been trying to find for a while, and I just never bothered to look for it properly. But in case you were looking for this October 4th, 1999 Forbes magazine issue, it says, some call Burning Man, quote, the Bohemian Grove for the next generation. The original is a Northern California retreat founded in 1878 and still frequented each year by artists, musicians, heads of state, and corporate titans. That's, of course, Bohemian Grove. Its motto, weaving spiders come not here, means this isn't a place to talk about business.
Is that what that means? Dang, I was wondering.
What kind of business? But at both gatherings, webs are woven anyway. Oh, God, Forbes magazine is really, I think underrated a little bit. But Jeff Bezos, billionaire campers. Jeff Bezos in 1999, Bohemian Grove in 1878, David Rockefeller. Okay, so they're trying to make their synchronicities known. Main ritual, burning wooden coffin under 40-foot owl. Burning Man, burning wooden 40-foot effigy of a man. Helps relieve the stress of running e-commerce. Main ritual helps relieve the stress of running the world. I don't know. I feel like there is some synchronicity there. I don't know if that's just too close or not, but
I have a question I'm not sure if anyone can answer. The infamous footage of the cremation of care ceremony, was it part of the ceremony, or was it someone speaking to the rest of them when he says, this summer we are set free, or we've been
set free?
Yeah, that's part of the thing. I've got hold on. I happen to have right here a few Bohemian Grove books. I have a few books, and let's see, where's this one? They say at the beginning, first off, like let's see this. This is the property of FF Jenny Avery at one point, and this is the
Avery of Angel Camp.
I assume so.
Was that the same Avery? I can't remember.
We'll have to do a deep dive. The Golden Feather, which is one of the Euclidean plays done. This is the 1939 edition, so we have to take care of it. But at the beginning, they talk about the beginnings, and they make all the sort of references to the spiders we've not here, and etc. And okay, on one starlit night, I peered down through the trees at the grove. I saw you reclining on a carpet of evergreen fronds, gazing up at the treetops. You appeared exalted under, quote, the soft caress of the night, and your heart was filled with poetry. Then later in our leafy temple, you gave us your beautiful mythological song, Birds of Rhiannon, symbolical of the fellowship of man and his vague eternal pilgrimage in quest of something always just beyond. It was then you told us, not all may sing, but all may hear what songs are sung, both in the feathery kingdom and in Bohemia. I represent those who do not sing. By the way, interesting, is it not, that Bohemia for them is that they're like in a citizenship. Being part of Burning Man is like you go to the city of Black Rock City, you're a citizen, you're a civilian of the city. Mm-hmm. So Bohemia for them is this 19th century analogy of, we don't have a state, but we have a state of mind, right? We live in San Francisco, we're in New York, but we're Bohemians. We're part of Bohemia. It's their own Tartaria. It's an interesting thing that they've pulled up.
It has to do with the bowl, right?
Yeah. But so the deal is, you got to go further to find all the stuff, but they have all the rituals. They tell you where they're supposed to stand. They have them presented, and they have the way that you're supposed to explain, it's essentially Masonic rituals to an extent, but they're a little bit their own, a little bit more poetic even, but they'll be like to the east or to the west or the right. And the cremation of care ritual is literally to, for a week, say, okay, now leave us alone, gods, which is like an interesting side note. The Dutch, who had Irish on their boats, right, when they were in the Dutch East Indies, and the Dutch were also the Spanish. So the Arabs had the Spanish took over Holland. Then after the 70 Years' War, you have the Dutch East Indies, and they've got the Irish still working for them. They're all over the place. They're in Indonesia. The Polynesian islands have their own gods around Krakatoa and everything else, and they believe that they have, instead of priests, clowns. Fun fact. And the clown is supposed to laugh.
Do the clowns have crowns?
The clowns they wear these masks, which is also amazing to study how to move without your face being seen. As
very trickster god.
The trickster gods are key though to this. They do all this clowning around because the gods are having a really hard day all the time. Every day is really hard to be a god. So if you make them laugh, they're less likely to kill you. Right? They're less likely to make you suffer. And if you atone for it, if you give them a sacrifice, you do a big ritual, have some clowns come to town, burn a pig, something like that. They love it, right? That's the idea. So this kind of idea, you've got this idea of paganism from Corpus Christi Dutch and Irish that have come over, that they were pagans. They've been forced to be Ottoman, Janissaries, or Christians, or eventually don't care, that are learning from not Santeria, not from the Caribbean, but learning from Indonesia. And then they continue that tradition along in the West in their idea of Nova Bohemia. And they're saying, okay, well, we'll just continue the thing. We're burning a pig at a luau, an effigy of a guy, and then we have a big show with a bunch of art and everything else.
Yeah. As far as I can tell, Bohemian Grove, at least the cremation of care ceremony, is the most arrogant thing I've ever freaking seen in my life.
Yeah.
Like, if you dig into the implications of what is being stated, it's a celebration of not trimming back the tree. So they're like, yes, in the old ancient world, anthropologically, we know we used to do these steps in order to ensure the longevity of a kingdom. And in this case, they're like, not only are we not going to let that happen, we're going to celebrate it and have another year of pulling it off without having to do this thing. So when you relate to these kind of traditional ideas around the Jubilee of how to avoid the bitter judgments, because the judgments are inevitable, but you could have sweet judgments or you could have bitter judgments. It's like, what did you think was going to happen? You were running around in ski masks? Come on. It's like, it seems really obvious, but oh well.
Wow.
But then, in California, if they put off the fire, when the fire finally comes, it's like the biggest fire, an uncontrollable fire, right? So
that's it. Yeah, we need to rake a lot more than we're
do more work, right?
On Great Reset, we talk about the Great Reset, but sometimes we forget the fourth industrial revolution, another term that I think is the more like, if you're looking for a Klaus Schwabian idea, this is more likely something he came up with, right? It's because it just sounds like something he would say. It's like, it's the, maybe great is, he could have added the word great. It's not just a reset.
Right. They say
great.
Popularized here. They should say mastermind. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's popularized might be, here's the deal. The idea that there is a automated future that's coming and replacing not just jobs, but art and dreams and ideas and everything else, and documenting things that could never be seen before. So all of a sudden things are called into question that normally would have been just left alone. Hey, some guy jaywalking is picked up on Google Maps in the Serengeti. You know what I mean? What do we do to him? Like, where are we at? So what is this? People are giving the last of their money in order to check out their sales at the grocery store. Sure. So how far are we though? Like how much money you guys got left? You know what I'm saying? Like, are we about to be this, or like how long? Is it 5 years or less? I mean, and is anybody going to make it?
20.
You got to hit bottom before you can come up, man. They got to bring it all the way down.
Yep.
And
this system has to be bad enough that the new system is the only thing acceptable and the only hope.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Even if it is the low-hanging fruit,
Right. So many of the like cultural movements that I see like have the same like basis, and like oftentimes it's like it's a huge elephant in the room, but it's like we're talking about body autonomy. People have really strong opinions in different areas that relate to bodily autonomy. So on one level, you'll have people really, really focused on gender issues and all this. That's big pharma. Like big pharma, like you're talking about all the medications that people are taking that are related to transitioning and all this stuff. You talk about COVID, we're talking about vaccines and all these products, like including what you were mentioning with like PCR. Like this is all money and big pharma, and yet it's like, isn't it weird that like a lot of the movements that are kind of being pushed like are actually like not necessarily always coming so much from the people, though we treat it like it is, like this is what we want, but then it's like it's that engineering of consent that Edward Bernays spoke to. Like it just seems so obvious. I would really like it, like in an ideal world, I would like it where all these people so concerned about bodily autonomy, I would like it if they saw how their causes overlap, where they connect, because like I see
vaccine mandates.
Yeah,
man,
totally.
I mean, TERFs, right? So TERF feminists. This is the thing. J.K. Rowling, I think, embodies this, because it wasn't long ago that feminism was a dirty word. It wasn't too long before that feminism was the great word. You know what I mean? It goes back and forth, but there was a point there. I believe it. I admit it, that feminism was an essential term that needed to exist, and then maybe it got to a point where it was misused and misappropriated to the point it is now, where there are actually trans exclusive radical feminists saying the same thing and being called and labeled TERFs because they're JK freaking Rowling. I mean, they just want women that have babies for real. I don't know how it's gonna, is you allowed to say that?
How many straw man can exist like all the time? Like that is such a straw man. It's like every time that you want to discuss the nuances of an issue, the labeling just comes in, and that's how canceling works, right? It's like you get.
But this is amazing because it means
it's
good because it means that women feminism is a good thing again, right? Because what it means essentially is it's back to and this was my contention with it during the time before the transgender movement really started to take off. I think in 2012, Sheila Jeffries in The Industrialization of the Vagina, and what's her book on transgender studies? She has a transgender studies book also. But that book specifically gets into this idea of feminism and equality and what the difference is between feminism as a socioeconomic class that's existed, at least in the last few centuries, if not longer, because of course we can look at different periods in time and we can talk about the Amazons and everything else and see matriarchies in Africa. There's room there for interpretation. It's not all cut and dry, men are bad and women are good, or women are oppressed and men were always in charge, or any serfdom. The thing is, the same system that works to oppress the male then was used to create microsystems of oppression in family nuclei, which is the other reason that they're afraid. It's not just ableism. It's this idea of masculine, feminine harmony. And so if feminine femininity is allowed to exist now because it's like, hey, it's human. That was the original contention. It was feminism should have been about getting women to the same place that all men are created equal. All humans are created equal. We get that. But beyond that, if it becomes special interest, then it turns into reverse sexism, which people don't like the word reverse or inverse or any system of sexism that's called, what do they call that? Where equity, like equitable affirmative action or something to that effect. If we move beyond that, then we're into the situation we're in now. So we need to protect humanism, perhaps, this idea. But is that true? Do you think that protecting the human might lead to a populace of soft survivors that don't really thrive?
Sounds like emasculism happened first. Men were getting emasculated because these women were trying to take, kind of a masculine role. And then that pushed a lot of them into transitioning into being women, and now they took over women's roles, and now the women are mad, right? And it's
yeah.
Right?
And then the scary stuff where it's like, is this just sterilization? Like, is this like they were like, how do we sterilize? I'm sorry, maybe that's not.
I think that's
I want to
relevant.
be able to say these things without just saying this is what it is. Like, I don't want to participate in that kind of like where we have the conclusion and then we're just trying to back. Like, I'm not saying I'm like. But I feel like there's an element of that to be said. That's what a lot of this
it's
stuff.
all Depop.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Make us weaker, dumber, more lame. I have 2 little boys. I don't know if any of you guys have kids. I've been married.
I got a little boy.
I'm divorced.
I don't know if I have kids either.
I have a lot to say on all of those topics like marriage and what it does with masculinity, what this world tells men nowadays. Guys, David, I've watched you on here, man. You're awesome. But so I've been a firefighter paramedic for 15 years. You need masculine men. You need people that are willing to do dangerous things. And when you tell everybody to put a diaper on their face for something that they surely will survive, good luck getting firefighters and warriors in the future. I have 2 little boys, and I will tell you, it's a plan to depopulate them. They do not want families. That's why they don't want the Amish or the Mormons. They don't.
Right, but you realize, like as you're saying this, like it's completely a valid point. And when you say they, who are we talking about? Because we can discuss, yeah, totally, the state, corporations, all this kind of stuff. And then you're like, and then there's the people who have basically been engineered to take on other people's agendas as though they were their own, and there's talking points that they're given that seem on a certain level because and how do you, because it's like you'll have A plus B equals C. A may be true, B may be not. It doesn't equal C because B wasn't, but then you're stuck with you see what I'm saying? It's like it's a syntax error. It's how you arrive at the thing. And so like I'm one who's just like, I would much rather, instead of fighting people on this level, on these like where we have assumptions about what all our definitions even mean. Like when you say like depopulation, you're talking about something very specific that's like high elite attitudes about the populace and means
not necessarily high elite though. Actually, people who watched David Attenborough's Blue or Planet Earth or whatever, a lot of normal people, a lot of people who read New Yorker are all about
good intentions.
It's a typical state of mind.
Comedy Central in the late 90s, early 2000s, there were comedians saying like, I love people, but I wouldn't mind anything that made room on the 405, right? I mean, it's not an unusual thought. Depopulation is especially popular in urban zones, places where people are in more cramped quarters than the rest of the population, right? So, I mean, there's maybe something to be said about higher ceilings before depopulation. I don't know, but
it's been like mass marketing campaigns of anti-humanism and nihilism.
I think anti-humanism is a bigger issue than people will let on, and transhumanism is a lot more encroaching than people realize. So this idea of the state taking over the roles is essential to this. Corporations, especially, that's an important part. If you've ever watched Mannequin 2, Mannequin on the Move, the point when he brings the mannequin into the house and she's humanized, he's able to get her to love him because he has all of these Sony products from the mall, and because he can make the machine cut the frozen orange juice and can and then cook it in the sausages in the toaster, and he can use all modern corporate technology in order to do what the female should have been able to do but can't do, because she doesn't know how to do any of that stuff in this role as a princess. She's just a princess, right? The royal figure who's impotent, again, is this idea. But then you've got this this idea of the masculine. Oh, women can do what men are doing. Is that true? No, because men are no longer doing what men are doing. So the state's taken over those roles, and now the state's taken over the roles of the female as well. So you have this thing that's still alive, but has no meaning in life. It's a kitten with it's a fur ball with a broken spirit locked inside, looking out a window. That is humanity.
Mimicry.
I think they're testing us to see if we'll cull our own genes. I was just thinking that they're testing everybody to see if you will allow your genes to be culled, because if you don't pass on your genes, no one else, that's the end of your line. So everything is actually just culling off specific genes. You're getting tested in all these different ways.
Wasn't that one of the
see
things
if you can last through the process?
Wasn't Epstein all about fucking putting his DNA in as many people as so what was the story there? You guys know?
He was trying to repopulate the world, and those were a lot of that was through sperm clinics. You know, a lot of these doctors get in trouble, but that's why he was working with a lot of people involved in cryogenics, OBGYN type, all of that.
Clonade, right? You're putting money into cloning.
23andMe or Ancestry.com. One of those founders is a confirmed pedophile, so he was hanging out with Epstein.
There's also talking about if you're culling your DNA, it's not just your full sequence now, because they're able to scan your DNA and they have copies of it. In case they come along with some sequence that's useful from your lineage, they can put that sequence into a pill or something, some sort of an injection, right? That's sold as an adenoviral. So it's plausible that you can imagine to yourself, well, maybe I won't have any kids, but millions of people are going to have my glaucoma adaptive gene, and so I'll be able to live with that. I think you're going to see a lot more people going through that as well.
I think they're just going to mine and harvest all of our shit to plug in and patch their inbred freaking bloodlines of these royals, so they don't look like Zuckerberg anymore.
Right. So that's what I was talking about before about the Bohemian Grove Golden Bough connection, is because we had things in place to keep the bloodline, not to keep it entirely in the family, because that was recognized that's problematic. They've done studies that have where they did the study where they had a bunch of men working out in their shirts, and then they took those shirts.
This was a study? Sorry.
Yeah, this is crazy. You can look it up. We could find it probably pretty easy. But yeah, they took all these men's shirts. I think it was 100, 200 men or something, and they put them into containers, and they had hoses from the containers, and they had all these women, equal number of women, who basically had a mask with the hose with the shirt where these different dudes work at, and then they showed them computer screens, and they would go through images of men. It's like Tinder, swipe left or right, or rate on a scale from 1 to 10 of how attractive they are. And it wasn't even about those men. It was just about looking at overall how on the upside, in other words, how attractive in general the men were. And they were, of this big group, the one who scored the least for the least amount of being attracted to different men, it was her freaking brother's shirt in the container, and she wasn't no one, and that speaks volumes that intuitively, or not just intuitively, biologically, there's an imperative that we know not to do that. And then
unless you're a lizard people, am I right, royals? Right, exactly.
Right. So then when you get into the royals, it gets really interesting, because you look at George W. and he's from the Windsor line. It's dude, he looks I'm sorry, but hey,
he's tall. Yeah.
The DuPonts have their own asylum, bro. The glass on the top of the wall faces inwards to keep them from getting out.
See, but
it's a real thing.
This scares me. Yeah, right. That's pretty brutal. This scares me though, because you think about these people that run the world, and if there's a kind of genetic control. Okay. Also, in terms of personification, like Elon Musk being famous, same background, obviously. His dad's got his stepdaughter he's married to, and all this other stuff, has a new kid with her. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in terms of taboo families out there, right? So how close that Jeffrey Epstein got to being socially acceptable? For a while, he basically was. And when they started trying to really pry society open and find the half of humans that still care about children, even then, I think it was kind of hard for them, because there's enough people that were so embedded in the system that they're like, can we just make this go away? Yeah, this happens. We live with this every day. We run this system, right? And so I kind of feel like that's not too unlike what happened in Soviet Russia or in, Nazi Germany or anything else. At this time, he's not an anti-Semite. Next time, what's it going to take? How far along are we from the next cultish dictator or persuasive person, especially now influencer, despotic influencer?
The oppressed become the oppressor so often. That's generally how it goes. And then also when we're talking about generational amnesia, everything gets twisted because it's like when people talk about what their ancestors did as though they did it. And you're like, dude, there's no substitute for experience. And like, we haven't been able to record like we do now, even if you see a recording of something, it's still, you're projecting your own paradigm into the thing. Like, it's like paintings where it didn't happen, it's like, what are you supposed to do about that? It's probably
Has Ezra Miller ever been to a protest? Right? Because think about it, because he could be Hitler. He could be the next one. Because all it takes is like a vegetarian painter who's pseudo famous getting arrested at a protest and a book comes out. And then if they're following all of the socially just categories at that time, then they could be the person that leads the next thing. It doesn't have to be Ezra Miller, but it's that level. It has to be somebody like that. That's the kind of thing that's going to happen.
Well,
and it's going to be socially acceptable.
If he's from the system, I mean, I don't believe any of these movements, any of these leaders, whether it's
from the people, right?
Che or any of these, they're all insiders. They're all bloodlines. It's all planned events. It's like Trump is going to save us from the blood when the dude is the tip of the spear in a Jesuit trained school worshiping the apotheosis and gold. It's like, it's laughable.
Oh, it's so laughable. Yeah. Have you ever done a virtual tour of his penthouse suite at Trump Tower?
Floor.
And how many Apollos? Count the Apollos as you go through it. My God, that guy's got a lot of Apollos. And it's the gold thing, it's the sun.
Yeah, it's the reason why he's always showing you the same phallic symbol too.
Right. But at the same time, that dude didn't get invited to the occult cool parties. Right. He probably wanted to. That's my feeling.
I think
people can disagree if they want, but I think he wanted to at the time when he was like hanging out with the Clintons and shit. And it's like, they didn't want him to go because they're like, this guy talks. What's the number one requirement for like Freemasons?
Not being
you know how to keep a damn secret. And I don't think he knows how to keep a secret.
No.
And is that a bad thing?
I mean, that's not a bad thing.
That's the thing. So it's all these catch-22s,
And it makes sense to me also that like somebody from inside the system, it's kind of like, you got to be from that. You have to be a citizen of that state in order to be a revolutionary or something like that. Yeah, he was definitely connected to the thing as closely as he wanted, or as close as he could be, but not as close as he wanted. He's on the far out of this thing. They don't invite him to the parties. They go to his parties sometimes because he threw the best parties. But he was constantly trying to make himself this new money thing, the way the Kennedys had made themselves a new money thing. And I think both families paid for it because new money does not get to become, there's like between the trapezoid and that floating pyramid with the eye above it, right? There's like a space on that altar where they just sort of let people get slaughtered, right? So I don't think
those are like the third cousins, because Trump.
Right, that's true. That's true. But there is something there to that too. The Targaryen or whatever. So the idea that
Aryans, the Targaryens with white hair are the Aryans, and everybody roots for them. They also fuck with the Dothraki, which are the Iraqis. It's
right.
Yeah.
There's some
exclusion zone water, but instead of water, it's blood.
Yeah.
You're right there. There's that little line, and you can get real close.
And that's the idea that they can talk to their spirits because their blood has the specific antenna, so they're trying to carry it on. So maybe they are more in touch with the snake energy or the serpents.
What do you guys think of the deep state thing? Because when honestly, I'm like, dude, like when we discussing the DNC or something, it's like, dude, they fucking donated all this money. The Clintons and others donated all this money. Of course, when it comes to any decision-making process, it's like they're at the front of the line. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, they own the freaking thing. So do we even need a deep state? Like, and what is that
anymore?
Completely. Like, yeah, that's not anymore. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I think it's not anymore because I think there was a shift where all of our crazy ideas started to be pushed towards the public. I don't know. It felt that way anyway, where it's all of a sudden where these kind of ideas were just more available to everybody. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's kind of what it felt like at a certain point. I would say before Trump, probably 2012, most likely, right? I mean, that sounds like a good one.
I felt like as soon as Obama was brought in, it was this whole new thing because
change.
Yeah. After Cheney and Bush had unitary executive power, and there was a lot of people that were trying to say, hey, I don't know if you really want the president doing all this stuff. What happens if the next president, you lose control of them? I think even then they were saying, hey, we need to just try to continue folding the sovereignty of the United States into an international social contract, a governance contract, which would limit what any state could do, including the United States. And you could see this with federal judges, because federal judges started using UN, ICC, criminal court, international case law. So they'd say, okay, well, we're going to give you this ruling in Alabama or in some federal, for the United States, based on this other case that happened in the case of Zimbabwe versus General Butt Naked or something like that. We're going to just, that ICC case will be, and so by doing that, then they said, okay, well, it's common for the United States to base its decisions on what is relevant in the ICC. And then from there, we can say, hey, the United States isn't really copying or harmonizing with the ICC. The United States should start to amend its laws more. And that all started, at least 13, 14 years ago.
Yeah.
I think the deep state is, one, it's just another vague term for something that we can never really pinpoint and say it's these people, but it's that bureaucracy. It's those people that hide behind corporations. I fully believe our problem is we're a nation of corporations. We're all corporations being sold on the stock exchange with our birth certificates and all this crazy shit. But also, it's Amazon that did it. Oh, it's Walmart that did it. We're not saying it's these people behind the scenes in all of them.
Right. Are you familiar with Webster Tarpley? Anybody? Do you know Webster Tarpley? Webster Tarpley was like, I used to, at the very beginning when Bernie first ran, I thought he was Webster Tarpley, and I got totally confused because I was like, dude, these guys because Webster Tarpley would talk really, really intensely, really strongly about corruption in government and all this stuff, and his views on 9/11 I feel like are some of the most rational of almost any of the 9/11 researchers that I've come across. And he's extremely empirical. He just basically makes, simply put, he makes the argument about rogue facets of government, and that it's really misleading when people say like 9/11 is an inside job. So as far as I remember, he something he expressed which I resonate with is the idea that Saudi Arabia, Israel, and America, but not just that, like rogue facets. And that idea of the deep state is the place where I'm like, oh, is that what they're kind of pointing at? And that it kind of gets muddied in trying to decipher what it is that we're just.
I mean, you've got these paramilitary corporations that have to exist. You've got these lifetime judges or these long-term judges. You have governments that exist beyond the 4-year terms. The governments that are these presidents, they have their own presidential party, but then those are, of course, it's impossible to be that dynamic. They have to be more multi-partisan. So you've got issues that are driven by steering committees that are on both sides realistically and have more to do with the place that they've always been in charge of by the senator. So the Congress, for instance, is running based on what the Senate wants. So we do have like a deep state in the sense that you have a longer cycle for that culture, that Washington culture. And there still is this socioeconomic class division for spy versus spy, right? So spy and spy, they don't see their superiors nearly as often as they see each other. So people that are on their congressmen are dealing with congressmen, multimillionaires are dealing with multimillionaires, VCs are dealing with other VCs. It's a thing where they're on the same level. So of course, at a certain point, these are the only ones they're going to be able to interact with. Bilderberg becomes the only party you're invited to.
Right. And where are they doing that now? Is it still at the Bilderberg building, or they moved it?
We did look at that last year. Did we do that? Let me look at this. Bilderberg
That's
this year.
The name of the building. Let's be clear. That's not actually. There is no name for that group.
No, they do now. They have a club name. I thought we talked about this last time. They have maybe this is a different episode. I talked. It was on Wednesday Ultra. We were talking about Bilderberg 22 back on the menu. Let me see if I can find. Where is it at? Did I lose the article? It's horrible. Basically, it's happening, and there are 2 times as many members as ever before. They still
do it at the Bilderberg building. Is that what we're saying? We can watch them walk in there together, it's separately or whatever, and we see that's.
Yeah, it's still supposed to be quiet. Man, what is it? The Bilderberg members. Let me because there's a new. Where did I find that? More More members, more, bigger, faster, stronger, more members. I can't find it. I had this great pie chart last time. I wish I had known to bring it back up.
Did you type? You didn't type. You type that in and you get Alex Jones. Why is that? So somebody documented the association. Like, it's weird. I mean, the thing is the thing. What the hell? Even DuckDuckGo it's now compromised a bit too, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. This is horrible now. I should be using Gibberon or whatever, I guess is the one to use, but it takes a minute. Gibberon search. It's called Gibberoo. No, Gibberoo. Gibberoo search is the new search engine that's supposed to be pretty good.
Oh,
Brave's not terrible, but it's not super reliable either.
Yeah.
Brave. Yeah.
Bilderberg, but I don't know how well this does for news. That was the thing. DuckDuckGo still had news that was and it was Bilderberg. I forget. But yeah, basically, there's twice as many members as before. Man, I just totally don't remember where it is. I'll have to think about that and find it. But
because like if we talk about like the Trilateral Commission, we're talking about an organization called the Trilateral Commission. Are you saying that they just went ahead and took the leap, and the thing that the conspiracy theorists called them, they just went ahead and called themselves?
Dude, that's happening more and more. It feels like that's again we're saying like all our crazy thoughts are being pushed into the mainstream for better or worse.
Mm-hmm.
I call myself a pseudoscientist just because it's their word, and I don't have a degree, so fuck it.
Right.
There's an article that, yes, sir. There's an article you might want to pull up from Newsweek since we're talking about weird shit in the government. Newsweek, Inside of America's Secret Army.
Really quickly, because I did find it. I'm sorry, but so this is the article I was trying to find. Bilderberg. No. Bilderberg 2022, back from the lockdowns, part 1. Shadow government reemerges. Bilderberg meeting this time is, I forget, it should say somewhere here, if you see where it says, it might be in the UK, I don't know, but they have the new members, where's the thing? Okay, first off, they're bringing in all kinds of COVID specialists. That's the thing. It's going to have like 1,000 invites are like COVID people. Like it's just crazy. And then, let me see the pie chart here. First-time participants represent 66% of the meeting, right? So 66% of this meeting are new people. The steering committee is 27%, right? This is the steering committee that's existed for the last few years. And the red part here is the former steering committee, which insinuates a lot, right? That there's a new steering committee and that the new steering committee is even bringing in new people, like to double or more, actually almost triple the amount of people, no, double the amount of people that are the regular participants. So they have a whole new cachet of people that they're bringing into Bilderberg. The other thing is the United States greatly displaces the members from the other nations this year around. There's just so many more. And this isn't the case always. You look at the years of the United States, George Bush, there are some peak years, and it happens during a war that it happens, there's some more back and forth. There's a couple of years where it's a little bit less. Similarly, though, during the Obama year, more than ever, and then it looks like we either have unconfirmed data from 2013, 2014, 2016, or there was just literally no show. And according to the 2016, Obama had some no-show years to the Bilderberg.
Yeah, but how do we know? Like, how do we know where they're meeting?
Well,
like,
they have
other than the Bilderberg building.
I mean, Luke and Alex will be like standing out in front of the place. Usually, that's how I find out these days. But
I watched that. I watched him in front of the place. But I'm trying to understand. Like,
I think it's because that was the Bilderberg website, right? Like BilderbergMeetings.org is their official website, and I don't know if they tell you.
But they can meet anywhere they can want to.
Look, it says right here, Bilderberg meeting 2022 took place June 2nd through 5th in Washington, D.C., right? And then the participants can be found here. So they've gone full transparent. And the Obama years at that time were known for the Trilateral Commission years anyway. He was focusing on East Asia and Arabia, and then also with the American Trade Agreement and things in South America. Right?
That is really transparent. I mean, this is something that people would speculate on and maybe it's because it reached a certain threshold where just enough people knew about it anyway. They're just like, okay, we're showing you our cards, even though we don't get to see what goes on in those meetings,
Right. And then, but you can see here, of course, also it was getting more and more and more. And then 2022 is just through the roof, crazy amount of people. I don't know. So what do you think in terms of Bilderberg it was kind of quiet. It was canceled in 2019 or 2020. I think it's 2020. It was canceled, and now it's back on with a vengeance. Do you think that it's? I mean, look at what do you think of these changes? There's like all these new members and this whole new COVID support staff.
It just looks like engineering
expansion.
Yeah, that's the expansion for sure.
Yeah, they need a lot more people on their team, and they got to do more meetings, more indoctrination, because it's getting harder for these people. You know, everybody that they use, as soon as they serve their utility, they get rid of those people, whether it's Shinzo Abe or whoever. So they are constantly, their line of continuity of their government, these World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab types, seems to work a lot better than the old way of in your family, like the Bidens and shit. Their children, they never invest in.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I mean, it seems like people vote with their dollar also. So they have a very participatory voting system with money, and they know how to keep people engaged, and they can measure what people want or don't want or what they're willing to put up with in exchange. Maybe the economy is going to replace the state. Are we at that point yet? Or do we still need the state to be the legitimate source of violence to continue the New World Order or whatever they're doing?
I don't think state even means the same thing that it's meant in the past. You know, I think everything's like,
I mean, so
like we're talking about corporations, and we call them the same names as things that we're supposed to be separate from that. And so it's beyond enmeshed, is what I'm saying, I guess.
When you're a state, you have the legitimacy of violence. You can hurt somebody who doesn't pay taxes. You can force someone who doesn't abide by your social contract, etc. So when does a corporation gain legitimacy of violence, a force of violence?
I think
when it's for safety, man. When it's for everyone's, yeah, and it doesn't matter how many lives it destroys if it saves one now in certain cases. So what you might consider like common sense, like I was saying before, it's like that's not somebody else's. So yeah, a corporation can kind of make that call if we did the tests. And we tell you this is what is needed, if it's for the greater good, it doesn't matter if it's coming from a corporation or the state or whoever. And if the state is sanctioning what a corporation is telling them, then, good luck.
I think, and because we're seeing the result of our shitty educational system as generations get older, right? Like, we're not falling for it, but no one's listening to us. You know what I mean? So it's like, I guess there's something to be said there about our education. I guess I doubt it, but at least comparatively to what's happening now, I mean, as I'm a parent as well, man. And we're homeschooling because I don't want my child near any of this shit. Even the idea of socialization is a fucking scam. And everyone that I know and love and care about has brought up socialization to us, of course, because it's programmed into them to ask that question. Well, what about his socialization? Like, to become a narcissist, to become terrified of himself.
I mean, can't you just throw a kid into like a big, what do you call it? Like, a pig pen, like a bunch of wild boars. Throw them in.
Dude, we're going to be humiliated. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, man.
Give it a few years. It's not going to take that long. We're masking the toddlers. The amount of and pediatricians will tell you what they'll tell you or whatever, but guess what? Like with most things, there's no substitute for a time trial, and time will tell. And some people sense it like
these kids are going to be looking at us like,
dude, this is anecdotal, but like for me, I was deaf until I was like 2.5. So like I had to get a surgery where they put tubes in my ears, which over the years disintegrated or whatever to widen my canal so I could hear. So like I had like an extreme speech impediment until I was like in 9th grade. It got better between maybe 6th grade and 9th grade, but it was still there, and like I had a speech therapist when I was growing up, and she was like so important to me, and like a very dogmatic Christian school, and it was bad. I could tell you some fucked up stuff. I don't need to do that. But the point is like for me, like with the masking thing with the toddlers, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like I try and think about like what that would have been like when I was growing up, because that was really challenging to be like, because that's delayed development. Like if I was completely deaf.
People
So,
reject
like,
their parents over Santa Claus. I mean, this is
right,
gonna
and
be
like
nuts. Yeah.
looking at lips when somebody's communicating with you and acting like that's not going to be a problem down the line, and they're like, and it's just the toddlers that you like. You look at New York, and it's like, what are they, how did they justify this? It's baffling.
They don't need to. They really
right.
don't
And then
need
you
to.
got the lowest risk group. I guess maybe we need to be careful now for YouTube's guidelines here. But like, I'm like, dude, the lowest risk group, is that not true? Am I correct in that? It seems like the elderly are the
It's a
most at
question
risk.
I think we're allowed to ask.
And so are we doing it for the elderly, like to protect them? And even though we know that it doesn't prevent transmission, is that okay to say? Because it seems like they admitted that with the new guidelines.
World Health Organization did say that, right?
Right, they did say that. So I was like, it's always this thing where it's like, I was removed from Facebook from what I can tell, 3 strikes. First strike was sharing a screenshot from the CDC website that was on breakthrough cases. It had the 14-day rule saying you're not technically vaccinated until 14 days after your second shot. So I shared the screenshot, shared what they said. I got a strike for that. I got a strike for sharing a video I downloaded from a government website of a Black woman with a PhD in molecular and cellular biology like testifying before the House of Representatives. She said something that wasn't technically true the way she said it. She was talking about the population of Black people who were unvaccinated. She was speaking to DC, I believe, and she said it like as though it were everywhere. And so like maybe it was she could have phrased that better or whatever it was, but I got a strike for that. It's video I downloaded from a government website. I'm like, I'm trying to do this in the most appropriate, best way I can. And then the third thing that got me was sharing something from
Whoopi Goldberg,
a friend in Israel who was talking about Whoopi Goldberg, and basically what it came down to was qualifying that the Holocaust was not just about race, that it wasn't only about race. Not to say that race wasn't an element, but yeah, that was the one. So I never got like a time out on Facebook or anything like that in the 12 years or whatever that I used it. But yeah, no, as far as I can tell, that was what ended it for me. And so but the point is, even if you try and say everything according to what the official narrative is now, you're still getting penalized when it comes to social media or things like YouTube. Maybe, I'm sorry,
it's inevitable. We're probably going to
get out of it all and
we'll
not
probably
censor ourselves anymore and just say the truth, and say it and mean it. And the more of us that exit these platforms and go and build separate systems, the better. You know, I don't think like with these masks, bro, I have a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old, but they're not only trying to turn your kids and flip their genders and sexualize and all that, they're also trying to turn kids, nature versus nurture, autistic in a certain way, disconnected from human connection, not able to read social cues. They don't know when somebody else is speaking, talking. They don't know the meaning and the expression. And the difference in someone like my kids and your kids, Andy, to someone who is deeply in the matrix, deeply scared, their kids haven't left. It's in 2 years, you could change a whole society. And I mean, in 2 years, you can change a whole culture just by changing the children and scaring everybody around that.
That's our job. We're the millennial generation. If you look up millennial generation, it's talked about in the Bible, right? It just happens to link up with the millennials. We're supposed to package this information. So we'll probably be the last ones on the internet to package everything that humanity has put together to show these kids the truth. And at the same time, we got to teach our children to exit out of this and go and live life and quit watching other people live life.
Yep. Dude, I'm raising little John Connor.
This is so gonna backfire. I guarantee. I can't say that much that I can guarantee, but I can pretty much guarantee that give it this a generation, and a lot of the focus is going to be on genuinely like accepting oneself for who you are already, and not having to necessarily like create a new. I don't know. You see like how twisted that is, because it's like on one level you're telling people to accept themselves, like body image and all these things. On another level, you're saying I'm not born in the right body, so I need to adjust to make it. So it's like it feels kind of like a catch-22. I mean, doesn't it?
It's the exact opposite of David Bowie. It's the idea that you can rock anybody that you've been put into versus I can't handle this, whatever.
Thank you. And is that the reason why when it comes to LGBTQ that not all those letters can hang with the other letters? Like, because I mean, I spent a lot of time, my ex girlfriend lived in the Castro, across from the Castro Theater. And I spent a lot of time in the Castro. And what I saw from people, a lot of transvestites around there too, even though it's not it exists.
Normative, you can say it. Normative.
Yeah. And there's like if somebody was to insult one of those people, they would come back with the raunchiest fucking like it was like wow, dude, and funny, and like knowing how to like navigate these social issues. So it's like when somebody like comes at them with a lot of negativity, they say something that's so outrageous and so fucking funny that like everybody like they diffuse it with like this next level humor. Like I've seen that multiple times, that phenomenon, and like it's also so there's weird. Okay, can I just like Kevin Spacey? Okay, Kevin Spacey represents a certain demographic of gay men. Okay, like
really, that's unfair. Isn't it?
No. Check it out, because it's like so like my ex, she lived above a video store in the Castro, and we used to go in there, and they had a small section of like regular videos, and the rest is like all pornography, and they would like have like hardcore like gay sex like playing in the store, and so I got to talk to the owner a few times. And I had questions for him. I was like, what is your top selling stuff? Like, what do you sell the most of? And he said, above everything was turning. So if somebody can be turned gay, that's their number one sale. So in other words, like if you have a man who has been in like all straight porn, and then at a certain point in his career, he decides to do a gay porn, one gay porn can equal more than all the money he's made up to that point, to the point where he can sometimes retire off of it. So certain porn stars will go out with a bang because they're just like, oh, if I do this one thing, then I'm good to go and I'm set. So like this is a real thing. And so my trip out is like, I'm like, okay, so all these people are about tolerance. Like they want to, they want to accept and people and their different sexualities and all this stuff.
Owen Benjamin said it was like war torn.
One of the things I found kind of personally shocking as a straight man, just like having a little window into this whole world that exists there. I was just like, wow, some of this porn is like really aggressive. In fact, it looks like most of the masculine on masculine porn is extremely masculine, to the point where I'm like, when I heard the thing about Kevin Spacey and that he was like really forward, and I'm like, okay, number one selling porn is turning somebody who doesn't think that they're gay and becomes gay. Like that's the fantasy. And so
it says a lot about what homosexuality might actually be then also.
Right. And so like, this is weird. I'm like, you guys can think what you want to about this, but for me on a certain level, if you go beyond, like if you are forward and make a pass at somebody, like, and they're not down and you can't take no for an answer, super inappropriate. That means you need to do something about that shit. Okay. And it depends. Because there's still like this, I'm making generalizations. I'm not saying, hey, anything goes, but at the same time, it's like, that's part of the thing, right?
But
if somebody makes the move on, so it's like he was very forward. I'm looking for like, what was the thing that was like the career ending thing? Because for me, I can kind of be accepting of that because I've seen that and I know that exists and that's part of the turn on or whatever. But I'll tell you what, I bet you that a lot of people who are all about acceptance, if they knew that archetype of Kevin Spacey that they feel so strongly against, if they knew how common that actually was, they might not be so tolerant. So like, I'm just saying there's like kind of an ideal of what it is that everybody's about. And even when we put all those letters together, it also assumes that everybody's on the same page. And guess what? They're not. A lot of gay men have a lot of issues with the trans movement and all this stuff. And not just men, I'm just saying gay people. There's a big division there. There's a lot of conflict there. And it doesn't get addressed in the media. They present it like it's just this one thing and it's just this one movement. A lot of those people are like Harvey Milk. They're like, we've been at this for a long time to get to the place where we are. Dave Chappelle speaks to that phenomenon, like it's like if they were all in a van together and then you have the people and they're like, we're not against them. We just feel like they're making the trip take longer. You know what I mean? To get to where we're trying to get to. And so like, it's, yeah.
I had Owen Benjamin on my show, and I liked what he said about pornography being, when your nation gets conquered, first thing they do is they take your women and your children and even the men, and then they rape them in front of each other in order to demoralize. Not every war, but actually it's a thing that's been historically documented to be kind of an accurate thing. They will demoralize the subjects that they've conquered. Braveheart's about this. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So pornography does this in such a universalizing way. It's Jenny from the block. They want their next girl over whatever. And I think there was this Tucker Carlson thing. I don't know if it was real, but the idea of sissy hypno porn, in order to turn straight men gay. Like they literally make ASMR videos for this purpose, So, I mean, there's a lot to be said about, okay, yeah, they want you to be tolerant, but why? So that you'll tolerate being exploited, because that's what, and any corporation that gets involved with any message is going to probably attach that caveat or nuance that it will be to exploit you, or that relationship to have some sort of reciprocity. It might not even be positive reciprocity. So right, I don't
know. But isn't that the kicker though? Because you got people who feel really strongly about like the Christian groups that will try and they want to straightify gay people. What do they call that? There's a name for that. I'm being spacey.
Pray the gay away or something.
Yeah, pray the gay away type stuff, right? And then you have the transitioning thing where it's very encouraged, and you're like,
aversion therapy or something. There's a thing.
But it's like that. It's that backdoor thing, no pun intended, where it's like things come back around the other way. Like you're so focused on one thing, and then it creeps in from another angle, and you don't necessarily recognize it. And that's the thing about fascism too, in general, is that fascism comes through the freaking back door. I think every time, because otherwise, how would that happen? You
need to turn that into a poster, dude.
Sneaks up on you and rapes you.
Comes in through the back door.
It's a backdoor man.
Fascism is a backdoor man.
I mean, it seems like the irony of you've got groups that are trying to war with each other, and then one of them takes over and stops paying attention. So more and more splinters fall off of the collective. But then there's so many there, they become the next collective that consumes the other collective. I mean, it seems like that. It seems like fascism is, it's out of the social movement. It has to always come out of social justice or some sort of ideological struggle. It can't be, it's funny, but it can't be unilateral. It can't be singular. Fascism always is this smaller thing because it's a group of people against, all other groups or other larger sources. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Nah. Fascism.
I would also say that that we were speaking about like the body issues and the those kind of topics coming up. I also see that connected to the transhumanist movement, obviously, and also connected to the spirituality aspect that's related and also being pushed at the same time and by the same people that are involved with all these different topics, because the idea is that, man, I mean, I speak from like a psychedelic background, and it's very easy without the proper understanding to come back and start to follow the wrong people that start to tell you that the body means nothing, that physical material reality is just an illusion because of our perception. And man, I feel like I was in that fog for a while. I never questioned my body or anything, but there's many, many, many different ways to question that and feel that mentality and that philosophy is it's attractive to something. It feels right in a way, like, yeah, that makes the thing inside is way more real, and it is. But I also can't like deny this like alchemical allegory, I guess. It's that alchemically speaking, this is the only place that we can even coalesce together and have this conversation. That this is the only like linear time itself, physicality itself, like we are in right now in this configuration, is really the only way to capture this moment and reflect on it and be able to respond to one another. That there's no observation without this place. So we have to hold on to the body, and they want to take it away. And they have every new age AI, every category covered to deal with people looking inside and finding out that they're getting sold a lie about this very true thing, like a mimicry of what's really going on in consciousness. That was a lot.
Yeah.
No, yeah, for sure. I feel like mutation is the obvious inevitability right now. There's this idea that we're all about to start mutating in every direction, and it might be, it used to be kind of, hey, at least it's not me. At least it's my kids. My kids are going to mutate. But it's getting to that point pretty soon where the kids, it used to just be every generation was a little different. Now, in your lifetime, you could probably grow butterfly wings. That could happen in the next 100 years. It's not out of the
Especially
realm
with
of possibility.
Fukushima, you know, still pouring. Yeah,
I think it's more likely going to be a 23andMe or what do they call Monsanto now? What's their new name? They have a new name.
Air.
I thought it was like something with the moon, right? Oh, wait, that is what Monsanto is. Moon Saint. That's right. Okay.
The in regards to the just there's so much to unpack. This is such a fantastic dialogue. Jake, you're doing awesome. Andy, you too. So I want to touch on some stuff that you guys were both talking about. So in regards to kids, right? Young kids, up until the age of 7 years old, thereabouts, human beings stay in the theta wave state, right? In the brain, which is the same state that hypnosis is in. You can't just sit down and talk to a little child and say, listen, these are all the social cues that you're going to have to follow in our community for the rest of your life because humans are tribal entities. And so what happens is by fucking ambiguating all that shit, and all you can see is this. So what's that mean? I don't know, But when you start incorporating the rest of these things into it, it changes the rest of the dynamic.
Prolong the peekaboo. Yeah.
Andreas, do you know Jasmine? Do you know Jasmine?
I do know.
With dreads, plays violin downtown.
Probably. I do know some Jasmines from Santa Cruz.
So her ex-boyfriend has since passed. He died, but she was with him for about 8 years, and he wrote all these books. He was a playwright. He did all kinds of cool stuff. I'm not going to get into everything, but he wrote a book in the 1980s where he projected that our future would be characterized by basically everybody being forced to be masked. That masks would be the thing. That rich elite people would have like these bubbles, so they didn't have, so you could still see their faces. And he described a generation of people that wouldn't be able to understand social cues and communication the same way, and that they would basically be like, for all intents and purposes, kind of mentally handicapped as a result. He also had it's over the top. So another thing is that we end up burning into the moon so that everyone can see it. Goog, which didn't finish. It was supposed to say Google. This is in the 1980s. Yeah. So like he had this whole thing that a man named Bill would own everything, would own all the farmland and own all the like so much, and that he was basically like behind keeping everybody masked. And it's like, I saw the book, like I was like, this old he typed it like typewriter typed. It was like, is it
published? Can we buy this thing? Is it out there?
It's not published. I want
get a copy. I'll do my robot voice of the whole audio
Jasmine
book.
Has it.
Yeah, Jasmine and I talk. We'll set it up. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. I guess the point of me bringing that up isn't just like, hey, there's this weird thing, but that like this is almost like the nature of it, because he's not like a seer. Like he's just a guy. Like who's really into conspiracy theory stuff, and people would laugh at him for how outlandish his conspiracy theory stuff was. But like, 9 out of 10 things have come to pass that he considered in the 1980s and 90s and beyond. And it's like when this first started, he was alive when COVID started, and he was just like, this is everything I've ever talked about. Like it's begun. It's begun before this, but now we're really seeing it. And so yeah.
But look at Ottoman culture. Look at Africa. In the post, the post Libyan glass period. You've got a lot of classes of people that bear their face are only the elite, right? And even then, if you're in a judicial position, you're wearing a wig and a fake beard or something like that. But for the most part, people were covering their faces. A lot of the world, if they were worried about being property, if they were a slave, if they were a servant. Instead of a tie, you had your face covered in so many positions. Women still in the hijab and parts of culture, but this is still true with Catholic French nuns wearing their headdresses and things like that. The culture continued on. So there is a point in history where things become so crazy that people kill each other if they're just seeing their pretty faces, right? It seems like that's happened in history. And is that kind of the concern, or is it literally just can't read my poker face?
It's our scapegoatism tendency. Like we have a propensity towards scapegoatism and the othering of the otherable, and so this is how we're oriented. And there's actually a place for it to a degree, and it's to maintain a certain order. But when we do it to each other, it's different than we're holding people who are influencing policy and laws and our lives. And like if we're not doing something about that, then we're going to end up doing it to each other. And so like one way or the other, this thing is happening. But like we just because of the organization of society as it exists, not to say we couldn't end up with something radically different than anything we've ever had before, but the way things are set up is on this template, so to speak. So it's like this is the field we have to work with, and here's how it's going to express itself. If we repress in one place, we're going to sublimate someplace else, and so like it'll find its route. So you kind of like you can either do that intentionally and just have which all that really means is just accountability, you know. And if there's no accountability, then it all gets directed amongst the populace, and it's just total insanity, you know, which is where we're at.
Well, I think it's turning people into fucking robots and zombies. They can't make robots people, so they're making people fucking robots.
Right. We want to build
technology and all of these vaccines or whatever we got to call them. They seem to be like updates, and they're installing it in people one component at a time with a different label from a different place. None of them are going to be held responsible for it. And whenever this thing really gets revealed, no one will be able to blame it was this person, it was that guy that told me to do it, because everywhere is misinformation. Everybody who did it will be to blame, and they'll use us. What I see going on, guys, I would say I'm not concerned about it, but what I see happening before the midterms is some type of galvanizing event where they're going to really scapegoat the truthing community. Whether they use Trump and Mar-a-Lago and build some type of fake January 6th narrative again, that to me is the next shoe to drop. Because we know Taiwan, that's happening. Do they call us by sending us to a world war, or do they call us by a civil war?
Right. So what you're foreseeing is a continuation of what we already have, basically.
An escalation. Of what
we have. Well, I'm with you on that. Yeah.
I see in a civil war, in a real legitimate civil war, what's most likely is it'll be looked at like a crusade. And so they're going to say, there are two sides. In a civil war, really, it hits the two sides. So they're going to swallow up as many axes as they can. And then they're going to say, okay, really, we are against the opposition, and we're trying to fight a crusade against the opposition. It might not be a religious, it might be completely ideological. Like, are you for the system and for believing in the system and everything else, or are you an opponent of that? Do you question at all? You know, it's literally, there were crusades against Calvinists and against Bogomils and Christians that just didn't follow along with Galatians.
And now we have digital crusades.
Do you think that the crusade could be against people who are not emotionally invested into something that they've already spent a couple of years like shaming other people about?
See, I think the thing is a lot of people are losing their investments, even their emotional ones. And pretty soon that's even going to be a hard one for people. Like, people are so quick to, you know, they don't clap for George Bush because the light doesn't say applause. But when the applause light is on the Ellen show, they clap for George Bush. You know, we're at that point where people are just, and it's in a weird way beautiful, because it's kind of like this Vedic meditation would lead to people being so stoic that they can literally let things just come into their mind and come out of their mind. It sounds like a beautiful thing until you see it in practice, because it can be used, you know, mind control can be used by someone who's in a lot of control of their thoughts and their mind, or someone who's in control of someone else's thoughts and mind. I think that's where we're at.
Jake, you made a really good point relating to, like, you know, when you're talking about the vaccination trip, like mandate and whatnot. I feel like we're relating to, like, we want to continue, like, as a species and whatever. And like, when people name their children, like, you're continuing on your prodigy or whatever, you know, you want succession. And this is a point that I come back to repeatedly, but it's this idea that one way or the other, we're giving birth to the next species or the next whatever. Like, something is being generated and pushed out. And my feeling is that there's certain things you can infer of what it might be, but we don't ultimately know. But at least with something that you build, when it comes to machines, when it comes to anything that we manufacture, like, I feel like our our attempt is towards like creating that next thing when it's not really creating. Like we're trying to build our continuation, and the very nature of that is something that's kind of doomed, because the real natural intelligence that exists implicitly in the organism itself is so much more profound and so much more enduring than anything that we're going to construct. And so like I feel like this is all like we're like we're so arrogantly like attempting to build that thing that's going to carry on, like Kubrick's AI. Like we want that thing to live past us, when really that's all the periphery. Like that's all so superficial.
That's
that superficial thing. Like it's the thing itself. You know,
that's what it is. Because people, we're talking about like someone who doesn't have the masculine role anymore, doesn't have the feminine role anymore, because the state of the corporation is taking over the roles of the masculine and the feminine. So that's the next step for antinatalism, is have the state fully take over reproduction. And if at that point, then what do you have? What did priests have? What did a monk have, or anything? You have your monastery, you have your religion, right? So people can start to put effort into if my kids aren't going to live, my gene will go into the 23andMe bank. If my kids aren't going to live, my state and my science and my corporation will carry on, and the AI can make that even immortal.
Yeah, David, I know you like Kubrick and Asimov and all of those writers. Have you ever read Foundation?
I've heard a lot about Foundation, but no, I've never read it.
It's a really short book.
Who is that?
It's Asimov.
Oh, it is an Asimov book. Oh, okay.
Now it's very interesting. They made a little show on it, but the book, it really predicts this large data mining collection and using large data collection to mine and predict the future, which leads to steering the future by controlling the information. But in that, the way they set up these systems, I see it happening with us. I see science taking the place of spirituality and religion. I think that nihilism and atheism is really only held up by scientism. That science
right.
replaced
Although
God. Foundation in the future, the priesthood is really the science class, and they're going to these outskirts, these planets, these communities that don't have it, and they're granting miracles in the form of technology, turning water into wine.
Right. And isn't that pretty insane to, like, you know, when you say there is no religion higher than truth, like the theosophical axiom,
right?
And then meanwhile, a lot of people interpret that science is truth. We believe in science. Well, if your science is research papers, and then there's one research paper to contradict other research papers, and you're not like qualifying even what science means. So like for me, like I like to go by RCTs, because at least with randomized controlled trials, you can get some sense of like that variables are accounted for. There's all that stuff, and it's still not the ultimate truth. You never get to that point. But like if you're going by, like, so Fauci would say this if hydroxychloroquine came up. So he would say, show me the data.
Which is not in the policy of COVID, YouTube. Right. Be careful.
Right. But no, exactly. But this is what he said. So he said in response to that, when it came up, okay. But I mean,
this was just to YouTube, not to
right.
You.
Okay. But it's just like, if I use the word hydroxychloroquine, are we not allowed to talk about it? Like, is it like
basically?
That? Or,
basically. But you can do it anyway, because we're here.
Show the clip or something. Like, it's like when he was asked about that, he said, show me the RCTs and I'll consider it. But he's like, as it stands, you can show me research papers, but maybe it's a bad paper. Maybe it's a bad study. How do I know? Show me the RCTs. Well, if you made the same argument with him about face masks, we would be at an entirely different place than we are, because the all pooled data on face masks have shown no efficacy, practically zero efficacy for their use against viruses.
According to the WHO and the local health system.
According to the CDC website. I can share that. Like they say it outright. They say there's the efficacy for their use has not been shown.
But again, that's an interesting point. The CDC is not the World Health Organization, and so the World Health Organization is a world organization, whatever that means. So we're also looking at this idea of world governance from a health perspective as being supreme. And so if it's good enough for the CDC, it might not be good enough for the World Health Organization.
Right.
Ladies and
Again,
gentlemen,
that's our lack of education. It's the CDC is telling us that, but that doesn't matter anymore.
ladies and gentlemen, let's hope that this show gets to stay in the air. I thought it was pretty fun. We had a lot of interesting subjects, and if there is or is not a problem, we'll probably see you next week anyway. But I love it. I hope you tune in to watch us do this again, where we try to tiptoe on the borders of ideological censorship and oppression in order to give you as close to what truth you're allowed to have. And I'm thinking also maybe we should consider, I mean, Jake's got the Rumble thing going, right? Is that right? You're doing Rumble, Jake?
Yeah. I think a lot of us should move over to Rumble. It's the more.
Show me what's your Rumble link?
I just started it. It's probably 100th Monkey. 100th Monkey Jake Parsons is pretty much what I am on all of those. But with this recent deplatforming of Andrew Tate is the new Alex Jones. Eventually it'll be Joe Rogan, and then it'll be more and more people. Well, Andrew Tate went over to Rumble, and a lot of people are hopefully going to start migrating there.
100th Monkey Jake Parsons. I'm trying to find the page. There you go. Found you. Okay. So, I mean, I've also recommending Odyssey as well. I know Rumble is. So, guys, jump on both of these. Subscribe to 100th Monkey Jake Parsons. He's also got a YouTube. And I think what we could do, though, is I'd like to, if you ever want to do a show, I'd be happy we can jump on Rumble and do a thing there. What I'm thinking about doing also is my old show, my old boss's show had they have a bonus content thing afterwards. We could do 20-30 minutes afterwards that you could only get a link to in the Discord or something that's on Odyssey that is uncensored, and we could go even further. So that might be a thing to consider, because then we'd also be using the platform of YouTube to engage people. You guys watch this, then you can come on over and see stuff that's a little bit even beyond what we're allowed to do on YouTube to that extent. But I think
more
in general
in YouTube, basically, you're coming in here, you're pulling out the sleepers, and you're pulling them over to Zion.
I mean, one way or another, guys, join the Discord, join Target Nova, get into the club, and start talking to us outside of the boundaries of any sort of suppression or censorship. Because there is a level of this which is hey, it's advertisements, and we're gonna Johnson & Johnson ads are probably playing in between me talking about how they just got sued for causing cancer and killing that lady allegedly, who did die, and then they did lose the case. Then Johnson & Johnson, Texas two-stepped all the money out of Johnson & Johnson, so there's no money to pay all the victims of the lawsuit. So these are other things that we're talking about simultaneously to them saying we're not supposed to talk about them. That's a problem. Andy, where do I lead them to get you some content?
Oh, please come over and see me at thedeepsharepodcast.com. That's another thing I would recommend for people to start your own website. I mean, that's, I think, a safe bet, at least for now. But even the internet's a cage in some ways, so we'll see how that goes.
Is it
but yeah.
Deepsharepodcast.com.
Or it might be
not
actually, I think it's just thedeepshare.com. And I have not developed it much, but yeah, you can also hit me up on Twitter at the Deepshare, Instagram. I'm on Odyssey, as Andreas mentioned. Odyssey's a great place. YouTube, all the podcast apps. Come check it out. And Patreon as well.
I do love Odyssey.
I dive deep into Box Saga and history and shit like that.
Odyssey is pretty great, actually. I love Odyssey. And Jeremy Kaufman, who is the creator, is running for New Hampshire something, mayor, governor, whatever it is. So I would say look into Kaufman and support him. Curiosus Animus. Is that how I said? Is that right?
Pretty close, man. You're almost there. Curiosus Animus. You can find me by the same name on Twitter and on YouTube, though admittedly on YouTube, all you're going to see is me pulling triggers pretty much.
Cool. I've had you on my show a couple times. You can find them there too.
Yeah. That's me. Scott's Thoughts.
And then
that's the shit we talk about a lot right there.
That's what we gotta do. We'll bring this up next time. I think the thoughts, heart, emotion, that's key. And
we'll talk about a bunch of shit.
It's sad Eddie couldn't make it this time, but next time we'll get a little bit deeper into the Minotaur and the Labyrinth and the Taurus and the Saturn time loop that is the tie and maze of Jack Torrance. I think that's going to be good. So shout out to Eddie, and also hopefully he the Los Angeles Bay doesn't actually melt all the ice, and he can, because otherwise he'll be living by the beach in inner LA. David Plate, the syncbook.com. Where's that link? Syncflix. Right here, guys. You can find some of his stuff. Rebel Yell. Wait, is this new?
Yeah, I just put that up.
What?
So like the only album released the same day and year as Bob Fosse's Star 80 was Billy Idol's Rebel Yell, and so this is a pairing of the album and the film, and it does the whole thing. Yeah.
Oh, this is gonna be great. Oh man, I'll check this out. I'll definitely watch this movie. With
so there's like 200 plus films for streaming and download below that. Yeah,
you can watch any number of synchronicities. Natural Born Killers with Lana Del Rey. It's a pretty recent one. It's pretty good as well. I love his synchronicity work. Guys, definitely go to thesyncbook.com. Giant on the Twitter. I think that's pretty. Did I cover everybody? Did I miss anything? I'm so bad at covering everything. Did I get it all? Are you good? We're good. All right, guys. See you next week.
Later.